Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. I hadn't meant to come home early. Traffic was just unusually smooth that night. No red lights, no delays, just a quiet ride home with a bag of her favorite Thai takeout riding shotgun. I'd even picked up those mango sticky rice desserts she always craved but claimed she'd cut out for her diet. I wanted to surprise her. Instead, I was the one who got surprised. When I walked in, the lights were low. The dining room table was set, 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine. But only one chair was pulled out. My heart sank a little, but I told myself she probably just started eating alone. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she'd had a rough day. Then I saw the fork. Just there, lying on the floor like someone had dropped it in a hurry and never looked back. The pad thai on the plate was still steaming. And then her phone rang. Now, we had a rule. We didn't go through each other's phones. But rules don't feel as sacred when your pulse is thudding in your ears and something deep inside you is already whispering that it's over. I picked up her phone. The caller ID flashed a name I didn't recognize, Logan Droplet. That emoji said everything. I didn't answer, but the preview message popped up on the lock screen anyway. Did he find out? I left my boxers under the couch. LOL. No punctuation. No shame. Just 3 sentences that shattered 8 years of marriage in under 5 seconds. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there, looking at the phone, then the fork, then the dinner table that wasn't set for me. That's when it began. Not the heartbreak. That came later. Not the revenge. That was carefully planned. But the silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a straitjacket and squeezes until you forget who you used to be. I didn't confront her that night. I washed the dishes, put the food in the fridge, set her phone back down on the table, and I waited. Because if she thought dropping a fork was careless, wait until she saw what it looked like when a quiet man like me drops everything. The next morning, I watched her move through the kitchen like nothing had happened. She hummed while pulling oat milk from the fridge, her robe loosely tied, phone already in her hand. I stood in the hallway, just out of sight, and observed her, my wife, Lana, texting with the same fingers that used to trace circles on my back at night, the same lips now smiling for someone else. She never mentioned the phone call, never asked why the fork had been placed neatly on the counter. I realized then, she wasn't hiding it because she felt guilty. She was hiding it because she assumed I'd never notice. Because I was Clyde, the soft-spoken husband who always forgave too quickly, who apologized for things he didn't even do. That morning, I didn't make a scene. I made coffee. I buttered toast. I kissed her on the cheek and told her I had errands to run. And then I left, not for errands, but for a storage facility 30 minutes away. I'd already signed the lease under a fake name a month earlier, after the first late-night conference call had left her too exhausted to speak to me. I knew I couldn't fight fire with fire. I couldn't scream or cheat back or throw her clothes on the lawn like in those internet revenge stories. That wasn't me. But I could disappear. I started packing little things she wouldn't notice right away. My documents, family photos, childhood keepsakes, my late mother's necklace, which Lana had stuffed in a drawer because it clashed with the decor. Every item I took out of that house felt like peeling off a layer of my old self, a version of Clyde who had accepted being invisible for far too long. She texted me around noon, asking if I could pick up wine for dinner. I said yes. I even brought her favorite bottle home and smiled when she kissed me on the cheek. That night, we had dinner like a couple who still made plans for the future. She told me about a new marketing project. I nodded. I asked questions. I made sure she believed she was still in control. But I wasn't just packing physical things. I was unraveling our life, thread by thread. That weekend, while she went hiking with her friend May, who somehow never appeared in a single photo, I listed our second car online and got cash for it. I moved half of our joint savings into an account she didn't know about. I even printed off copies of the text messages I'd saved and tucked them into a file labeled Finale, which I placed in a locked drawer inside the storage unit. By the time she returned, sun-kissed, glowing, reeking of expensive cologne that didn't belong to either of us, I had erased myself from almost every corner of our shared world. And she had no clue. She laughed as she walked through the door. "You wouldn't believe how steep that trail was," she said, tossing her overnight bag on the couch. I watched her unzip it, saw the corner of a men's watch peeking out before she zipped it closed again. I didn't flinch. I just asked if she wanted leftovers. Because that's what I'd become, right? Leftovers. But soon, very soon, she'd know what it felt like to come home and find that everything she took for granted was already gone. The first real fracture happened on a Wednesday afternoon, though she didn't see it that way. She thought it was just another lie, smoothly delivered, harmless as always. But this one was different, because this time, I was watching her deliver it in real time. I'd taken the day off work without telling her. Told my manager I needed a mental health day, and honestly, I wasn't lying. I was exhausted, not from the pain itself, but from pretending I didn't feel it. Pretending I didn't notice the scent of another man's body spray lingering in our sheets. Pretending I didn't hear her whispering in the bathroom at 2 a.m., with the door cracked just enough for me to make out words like hotel and he'll never know. So I parked a few blocks away and waited. At 11:47 a.m., I watched her step out of the house in heels she hadn't worn in months, lipstick too bold for a lunch meeting. Her phone was already in her hand. She walked to the corner, got into a black sedan I didn't recognize, and didn't even look back. What she didn't know was that I'd placed an old phone in her glove box weeks ago, one that still had a functioning microphone app running quietly in the background. Not the kind of thing someone like me would normally do, but I stopped being someone like me the night I realized the woman I loved had quietly replaced me in her heart, in her bed. I sat in the car, listening in as she greeted him. His voice was nasal, cocky, and far too comfortable. They laughed. She joked that I still had no clue, that I thought she was meeting a client. He asked if she was bringing any wine to the hotel this time. She said no, she'd already drained me dry enough. I'll be honest, that one cut deep. Not because of the insult, but because it was true. I had let myself be drained, and for what? A woman who saw me as a debit card and a doormat? But here's where it all started to shift. That evening, I came home before she did. I calmly opened our laptop and started uploading everything I had, screenshots, recordings, bank statements, into a private online folder labeled in case. It wasn't for revenge. It was for insurance. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't imagine it all, that I wasn't just another clingy husband begging for affection she'd already gifted to someone else. When she came through the door hours later, smiling like she'd just won a prize, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Sorry, work was insane." I smiled back and said, "You're amazing, you know that?" And here's the thing, she believed me. She believed I was still blind, still safe to lie to, still hers. But something had changed inside me. The man she was cheating on, he wasn't home anymore. The one standing in that kitchen, handing her a glass of water while she wiped smudged lipstick off her neck, was someone new. Someone who wasn't planning to yell, or cry, or throw things. Someone who was building an exit so quietly she'd never even hear the door close behind me. I lay awake that night next to her, watching her sleep, listening to her soft breathing. She looked peaceful, innocent even, and it hit me. She wasn't worried because she had no reason to be. She thought I would never leave. She thought I'd never change. She thought the soft man never becomes the one who walks away. But she was wrong. She'd been complaining for weeks about the flickering hallway light. I kept telling her I'd fix it, but I didn't. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want her poking around up there. The access to the attic was in that hallway, and tucked behind the insulation above was a metal lockbox, one that didn't exist until a month ago. Inside it, my quiet revolution. USB drives with audio files, color printouts of her texts, a notarized copy of our marriage certificate, and the final letter she would eventually read, just not yet. That morning, everything felt like it was tipping. She was on edge, like her mask was starting to slip. She snapped at me over nothing, said the dishes were put away wrong, and that I always did things halfway. I said nothing. I just nodded, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd be home late. I wasn't going to work. I was going to the courthouse. No, not for a dramatic divorce scene or some kind of legal ambush. I was submitting documents quietly. Ownership transfers, address changes, things most people overlook, the kind of things that don't scream revenge, but whisper goodbye. That evening, when I returned, she was pacing. Not panicked, but twitchy. Her voice went up an octave when she asked, "Where were you?" I told her traffic was rough, which wasn't even a lie. She narrowed her eyes, but didn't press. Dinner was quiet. She barely touched her plate. I could feel it, her intuition finally catching up. Maybe it was the way I moved slower around her, more measured. Maybe she felt the absence of the man who used to jump up to refill her wine or rub her shoulders without being asked. Or maybe, deep down, she knew what she'd broken couldn't be fixed. Later that night, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard a crash from the hallway. I stepped out and found her standing by the open closet. A box had fallen. It wasn't anything important, just old decorations. But in her panic, she'd pulled down the coats, revealing the safe tucked behind them. She froze. "What's this?" I shrugged, still holding my toothbrush. "Tools." She stared at it like it had whispered her name. "Since when do you lock up tools?" I met her gaze and said calmly, "Since I realized not everything in this house is safe." Her face changed then. The smirk she usually wore when lying to me vanished. She was trying to read me, and for the first time in years, she couldn't. She waited until I fell asleep, or thought I did, before she tried opening it. I heard her in the hallway, twisting the dial, trying birthdays, anniversaries, her mother's maiden name. But she'd never guessed the code. It wasn't a number she knew. It was the exact time her betrayal became permanent, 11:47, when I read that message from Logan Droplet. She finally gave up around 2 a.m. I heard her shut the closet. Then silence. I didn't sleep a minute. The next morning, she was up early, fully dressed before her alarm even went off. "Going somewhere?" I asked, pouring coffee. She grabbed her bag and said without looking at me, "Just need some space today. Maybe a drive." I nodded. "Be safe." As soon as she left, I opened the box, took out the final letter, added one new line in ink. "You found the box, but not the man you married. He's already gone." Then I slid it back into place. Because now, the game had changed. She was finally wondering what I knew. And soon, she'd discover what I'd done. She came home 2 hours after sunset, but I knew the moment her car pulled into the driveway. I'd been sitting on the floor of the guest room, the one she never entered, going through every last thing I was taking with me. Not out of nostalgia. I just didn't want to give her the satisfaction of throwing my life into trash bags once I was gone. She'd done enough damage while I stayed. When she walked through the front door, she was louder than usual. Not slamming doors, but not exactly quiet either. It was performative, meant to say, "I'm here, nothing to hide, nothing to fear." But I could hear the uneven breath behind her heels, the way she hesitated before heading upstairs. That false confidence was cracking. She called my name. "Clyde? You home?" I didn't answer. I stayed in the room, breathing slow, steady. I wanted to hear how long it would take before she panicked. 10 seconds later, I heard her shuffle down the hallway and pause in front of the closet again. She opened it. She didn't try the lockbox this time. She just stood there. Then she whispered something, too low for me to catch. She called my name again, this time softer, like she already knew the answer. When I finally emerged from the guest room, she spun around like I'd caught her red-handed. Her smile was forced. "Hey, I didn't know you were back. Thought maybe you went to your brother's." I looked her in the eyes and said, "I stopped by the post office." That froze her. She blinked fast. "For what?" "Redirecting some mail. Getting things in order." She tilted her head like she was trying to figure out what game I was playing. And then she tried to play innocent again. "Clyde, is something going on? You've been off lately." I almost laughed. Off lately. As if my distance was the problem, not the fact that she was lying to my face for months while sharing motel sheets with someone who called her my wild girl. Instead, I calmly walked past her and grabbed a folder from the desk drawer. It had no dramatic title, no red stamp, just her name on it. "Lana." I handed it to her. She opened it, saw the printed texts, the hotel receipts, the gas station charges near his apartment, a photo of Logan's car in our driveway the night I pretended to be out of town. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked up at me, and for the first time, her face actually showed fear. Not guilt, not shame, fear. I said nothing. She whispered, "You knew?" I nodded. "I knew long before you thought I did. I gave you time to stop, to be honest, but you never even paused." Her hands shook. "So what now? You're leaving?" I looked around at the house. "I already did. This is just a shell. I've been gone for weeks. You just didn't notice." She tried to argue then, tried to twist it like I'd been cold, like I'd created the distance. But every word out of her mouth only proved she never thought I'd find the courage to walk away. She thought she still had time. She didn't know that while she was off building her fantasy life, I was tearing down the one she took for granted, brick by silent brick. The letter she'd find later that night would explain everything. Not just what I knew, but what I'd done, the assets I moved, the account she couldn't touch, the way I legally separated our finances without her noticing a thing. Because this wasn't revenge. It was self-rescue. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her footsteps pacing between the kitchen and bedroom. Sometimes she stopped in front of the locked closet, sometimes at the dining table, staring at the folder I left behind. At one point around 2 a.m., she sat on the floor in the hallway, crying. Not sobbing, just small, sharp breaths like someone realizing the oxygen had been sucked from the room. But I didn't comfort her. I just sat in the guest room with the door closed, listening to her fall apart quietly, the same way I had, night after night, while she was off living a second life. By morning, the air felt different. Still heavy. She didn't say a word when I came down to make coffee. She didn't touch the mug I placed in front of her. She just stared at me like I was a stranger. And that was exactly what I wanted her to feel. I'll be out most of the day, I told her, sliding my keys into my pocket. Don't wait up. She asked where I was going. Somewhere you're not invited. I walked out without another word. My first stop was the locksmith. He didn't ask questions when I handed over the service order. I had already updated the deed and the ownership documents. The house was in my name alone now, quietly transferred back through legal channels while she was too busy texting Logan under the dinner table. By the afternoon, the locks were changed. Front, back, and garage. I even changed the code to the alarm system and made sure she was removed from the emergency contact list. Every digital trace of her connected to that house. Gone. She wasn't there when I returned. Probably out somewhere trying to make sense of what was happening, spinning a story in her head where she still had control. I sat on the porch and waited. Just me and the silence. Around 7 p.m., her car pulled into the driveway. She got out slow, trying to look calm, holding her phone like a weapon. Her smile was weak, nervous. Hey, she said. Can we talk? I stood up and said, You're trespassing. Her mouth twitched. What? This is no longer your home, Lana. She laughed. That same condescending laugh she used whenever I tried to stand up for myself in the past. Don't be dramatic. I live here. I held up a sheet of paper, the updated deed. Her eyes scanned it. I saw the moment the panic set in. You're joking. You always thought I was too soft to do anything. Too quiet. Too afraid to live without you. But you forgot something important. Lana, quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means patient. She lunged forward. The door didn't open. The key didn't work. She turned back to me, her face twisted. You can't just lock me out. I already did. Her voice cracked. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. You should ask Logan. She didn't speak after that. Just stood there, trembling, realizing I had built an escape plan right under her nose, and she had been too arrogant to see it. Then I handed her a small envelope. Inside was the last thing she'd get from me, a cashier's check, her share of what I legally owed her, nothing more. No note, no emotion, just a clean break. As she stood there stunned, I stepped back inside and closed the door. She banged on it, screamed, cried, but I didn't open it again, because the locks weren't the only things that changed. So had I. 3 days passed before I heard from her again. Not a text, not a call, not even a message through friends. Just silence. And I'll admit, part of me hoped she'd stay gone. That maybe this was it. That she'd crawl back to whatever fantasy she'd built with Logan and pretend I'd never existed. But deep down, I knew better. People like Lana don't walk away quietly. They circle back when they lose control. It happened on a Thursday evening. I was checking the mail, mostly legal junk, final confirmations about the utilities being transferred, another form from the bank, when I noticed a manila envelope tucked inside, with no return address. I opened it on the porch, expecting some pointless legal threat from her, maybe a desperate plea for a meeting. What I found made my stomach twist. Inside were color photos. Me. At the locksmith. At the courthouse. Leaving the storage facility. A few blurry shots from behind a car window. They were clearly taken without me knowing, maybe by someone she hired. The message was clear, I see you now. But that wasn't what rattled me. What hit me hardest was the handwritten note tucked between the photos. In blue ink, unmistakably hers, it read, You think you're the only one who can play quiet? I've been watching too. Let's see how far you're willing to go, Clyde. You forget, I know where you sleep. Suddenly, the silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a trap. For the first time since this all started, I felt fear. Not because I thought she'd hurt me physically. Lana wasn't that kind of person. But emotional destruction? Manipulation? That was her specialty. If she couldn't win with seduction or lies, she'd try with threats. And now, she was playing the victim in reverse, rewriting our story to make me the unstable one. I could feel it already, the narrative shifting. I took a breath and went inside. Locked every door. Closed every blind. Then I pulled out my insurance folder, the one marked finale. It wasn't time to use it yet, but it was coming. The next morning, my neighbor called me while I was still half asleep. "Hey man, I don't want to stir up anything, but your ex was out here last night. Around 1 a.m., just sitting in her car with the lights off. Didn't knock or anything. Just watched the house. Thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up. I didn't panic. I didn't call the police. I just sat there in the silence of my new life, realizing the one thing she feared more than losing me was losing control over the version of me she created. She wanted to provoke me, to pull me back into her mess, maybe even get me to lash out, so she could play the martyr. But I wasn't going to give her that. I'd come too far. I had rewritten the story, not with anger, but with strategy. That night, I did something she didn't expect. I emailed Logan. No threats, no warnings. Just a simple message with attachments. "Thought you should know who you're lying next to. I used to believe her too. Good luck." Attached were screenshots, recordings, the legal filing confirming our separation, a copy of the check she cashed, and at the bottom, a single sentence. "If she starts rewriting this story, make sure you're not the villain in her next version." I don't know if he ever responded. I didn't care. All I needed was the seed of doubt. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. Sometimes, it's one quiet move that unravels everything they thought they built. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the same house that once felt like a cage. The grass had grown a little longer. The flowers Lana used to ignore had started blooming again. Wild, untamed, like everything else in my life now. The sun hit differently. Brighter. Not because anything outside had changed, but because something inside me finally had. She tried once more. One last message, left folded on the windshield of my car. "You got what you wanted. I lost everything. Can we at least talk?" I didn't answer, because by then, I understood something I never had before. You don't owe closure to the person who shattered you without hesitation. You don't need to open the door just because someone finally realized what they lost. Especially when they only want to reclaim control, not take accountability. Instead, I sat on the porch that night, watching the sky turn to velvet. My brother called to check in. My new job, the one I took in another city, was starting next month. The lease on the house was up soon, and I wouldn't be renewing it. I wasn't clinging to the ruins anymore. I was building something new. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Not vindicated. Not victorious. Just free. The funny part? She still doesn't understand what happened. She thought I'd burn everything down in rage. That I'd fight for her. Chase her. That I'd scream the way she once did when she didn't get what she wanted. But I didn't have to scream. I just walked away. And that, the silence, the stillness, the absence, was louder than any revenge could ever be. This isn't a story about winning. It's a story about letting go. About choosing yourself when someone else chooses to betray you. And if you're reading this, wondering if it's time for you to do the same, here's your answer. You already know. Thanks for watching this story here on Reddit Confessions. If you made it to the end, drop a comment below and tell us. What's the most unforgettable moment in history where someone walked away and everything changed? We'd love to hear your take. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories just like this, true, raw, and unforgettable.